Please, she's just a little girl. The words echoed across Dock 17 before anyone answered, and somehow the silence that followed was even worse. Every civilization in the Orion Reach claimed there was one universal rule. Children were never bargaining chips. Most honored that rule because it was right. The Black Talon Syndicate honored it because they feared what happened when someone ignored it. Unfortunately for them, one ambitious assassin believed fear was for weaker people. The docking district of Meridian Station was waking up like any other Tuesday. Cargo drones floated overhead carrying steel containers the size of small houses. Shuttle engines hummed through the artificial morning while merchants unlocked storefronts and poured fresh coffee for workers beginning another 12-hour shift. 8-year-old Emma Brooks skipped beside her father, swinging a paper bag that held 2 cinnamon rolls from their favorite bakery. "Dad," she said with a grin, "you promised I could steer the cargo loader today." Daniel Brooks smiled, without looking away from the maintenance schedule glowing on his tablet. "Only in simulation mode. Last time you almost crashed it into my toolbox." Emma giggled. "It wasn't almost." "You are absolutely right," Daniel admitted. "You nailed my toolbox." She laughed louder, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile without realizing it. Daniel had spent years rebuilding his life around moments exactly like this. Ever since his wife passed away, every morning mattered. Every school project mattered. Every bedtime story mattered. The rest of the galaxy could argue over treaties, politics, and trade routes. His universe fit inside a little girl wearing blue sneakers and carrying too much excitement for one small body. They stopped outside Bay 12, where Daniel's cargo transport waited for inspection. 5 minutes, he told Emma. Then pancakes after work. You always say 5 minutes. Because somehow it always becomes 20. She rolled her eyes with dramatic disappointment. You're lucky I like pancakes. Daniel chuckled as he stepped toward the loading manifest. He noticed something that didn't belong. The dock had become too quiet. No forklift alarms. No mechanics arguing over broken equipment. Even the gull-like maintenance drones circling the ceiling had drifted away. Years of military instincts whispered before his conscious mind caught up. Something was wrong. A tall figure emerged from between 2 cargo containers dressed like another freight contractor, face hidden beneath an ordinary utility hood. Nothing about him demanded attention, and that was exactly what made Daniel uneasy. The stranger never looked at the freight, never glanced at security cameras. His eyes settled only on Emma. Daniel took one slow step toward his daughter. "Emma." She turned immediately. "Yeah. Come stand next to me." Before she could move, the stranger spoke in calm, almost conversational English through a translator hidden beneath his collar. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Mr. Brooks." Daniel froze. Not because he was afraid for himself, because the stranger knew his name. Emma looked from her father to the visitor, confused by the sudden change in the air. "Dad." Daniel kept his voice steady. "Sweetheart, it's okay. Just stay where you are." The assassin smiled without warmth. "Good. You're thinking clearly." Daniel searched the man's posture instead of his face. Professionals always revealed themselves in the details. Balanced stance. Relaxed breathing. No wasted movement. This was not a desperate criminal looking for money. This was someone carrying out a contract. "What do you want?" Daniel asked quietly. "Something you have. Take it." "I intend to." The assassin glanced briefly toward Emma before looking back at Daniel. "The child comes with me until our business is concluded." Every sound in the station seemed to disappear. Daniel felt the world narrow until only his daughter remained in focus. Emma looked scared now, but she trusted him completely. That trust hurt more than fear ever could. Daniel swallowed once and asked the only question that mattered. "Will she be safe?" The assassin seemed surprised. He had expected shouting, bargaining, maybe panic. Instead, he found a father measuring every word like it carried the weight of a lifetime. "That depends on you," he replied. Daniel slowly lowered his eyes for 1 second, then looked back with a calm expression that the assassin completely misunderstood. "All right," Daniel said softly. "You've made your choice." Daniel did not move. He did not plead. He did not lunge toward the stranger. Instead, he looked at Emma with the same calm expression he had worn on the first day she rode her bicycle without training wheels. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "remember what we practiced whenever you got separated from me." Emma blinked away the confusion. "Stay calm. Listen carefully. Do not panic." Daniel gave the smallest nod. "That is my girl." The assassin watched the exchange with quiet amusement. According to every briefing he had received, humans became irrational when family was involved. They shouted. They negotiated. They made desperate mistakes. Daniel Brooks was doing none of those things. It almost disappointed him. "You are handling this better than expected," the assassin remarked. Daniel finally looked directly into his eyes. "I have one request." "You are not in a position to make requests." "Probably not." Daniel shrugged slightly. "But I am asking anyway. She gets hungry around noon. She likes pancakes more than protein bars. She gets carsick if your shuttle flies rough. She pretends she is brave when she is scared." Emma looked at her father. "Dad." His voice never wavered. "And every night before bed, she reads exactly 2 chapters. Never 1. Never 3. The assassin frowned. "You think I care about bedtime stories?" "No," Daniel answered honestly. "I think you do not have children." For the first time, the stranger had no immediate reply. Emma slowly reached for her father's hand. Daniel squeezed it once before letting go. "Everything is going to be all right," he whispered. "I need you to believe me." "But what if?" Her voice cracked. "What if you cannot find me?" Daniel smiled, and somehow that frightened the assassin more than any threat could have. "Emma, I have never broken a promise to you." She stared into his eyes for several long seconds before giving one tiny nod. "Okay." The assassin gestured toward the waiting shuttle hidden behind a stack of freight containers. "Time to leave." Emma hesitated only long enough to wave once. "Love you, Dad," Daniel answered without raising his voice. "Love you more than every star in the sky." She disappeared inside the shuttle. The hatch closed. Seconds later, the engines lifted quietly into the morning traffic until the small craft became just another signal among thousands crossing Meridian Station. Dock 17 remained strangely silent. Workers who had witnessed the encounter slowly emerged from behind loading equipment, uncertain what they had just seen. A station security officer hurried across the platform, clearly out of breath. "Sir, are you Daniel Brooks?" "Yes. We received an anonymous interference signal, but whoever took the girl already disabled every nearby camera. We are locking down the station." Daniel looked toward the empty lane where the shuttle had vanished. "Do not." The officer stared at him. "Excuse me. If you lock down the station, they will already be gone. You will only trap innocent people inside. We can notify Galactic Security." Daniel quietly shook his head. "By the time the paperwork starts, this will be 3 systems away." The officer frowned. "Then what are you going to do?" Daniel looked down at the paper bag still sitting beside the cargo crate. 2 cinnamon rolls had grown cold. He picked up the bag, folded it neatly, and placed it inside his jacket instead of throwing it away. Then he collected his old tablet from the ground and brushed a little dust from the screen. His hands were perfectly steady. "I am going home," he said. The officer stared at him in disbelief. "Your daughter was just taken." "I know. Should not you be chasing them?" Daniel met his eyes for only a second. "Running after them would make me feel better." He paused before adding quietly, "Finding her is what matters." Without another word, he walked toward the station exit at an ordinary pace, blending into the crowds like any exhausted father heading home after a long morning. Behind him, confused dock workers whispered that the human had given up. None of them noticed the old communications watch on Daniel's wrist vibrate exactly once before its tiny green light turned solid. Daniel Brooks lived in a small apartment overlooking the industrial side of Meridian Station, where cargo lights blinked through the windows every night like distant stars. It was not much to look at, but every picture on the wall belonged to Emma. A first-grade science project. A crayon drawing of the 2 of them standing beneath a blue Earth sky. A framed photograph from Yellowstone National Park taken years before his wife became sick. Daniel unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and closed it quietly behind him. The apartment felt impossibly still. Emma usually dropped her backpack by the couch, no matter how many times he reminded her not to. Today the backpack sat exactly where she had left it before school, waiting for someone who was not coming home tonight. Daniel stood in the silence for several seconds before placing the paper bag with the untouched cinnamon rolls on the kitchen counter. He poured himself a cup of coffee, took one sip, then set the mug aside without drinking another. His eyes settled on the old laptop resting on a wooden desk in the corner of the living room. Most people would have thrown it away years ago. The screen had scratches. One hinge squeaked every time it opened. The keyboard had faded letters from thousands of hours of use. Daniel pulled out the chair and sat down. The computer started slowly, displaying an outdated operating system that looked completely ordinary. Anyone watching would have assumed it belonged to an aging cargo engineer who hated buying new equipment. Daniel typed a series of random numbers, paused, erased them, then entered another sequence that looked even less meaningful. The desktop disappeared. A black screen replaced it. One blinking cursor waited patiently. Daniel rested both hands on the keyboard. He did not hesitate. Child taken. Authorization black. He pressed enter. Nothing happened. There was no confirmation message. No loading bar. No encrypted animation. The screen simply returned to black. Daniel closed the laptop as if he had sent an ordinary email. Across the galaxy, something else happened. On a quiet moon orbiting an unremarkable gas giant, an elderly mechanic repairing an antique shuttle paused when an obsolete pager vibrated once inside his toolbox. He stared at the tiny green light, closed the toolbox without another word, and walked away from the unfinished engine. On a research station drifting near the edge of unexplored space, a middle-aged woman wearing a laboratory coat looked down at an old digital watch that had not activated in nearly 12 years. She quietly removed her identification badge, placed it on her desk, and left the building without explaining herself. Deep inside a cargo vessel crossing an empty trade route, a gray-haired cook glanced at a faded photograph taped inside a kitchen cabinet. His expression hardened as a secure communicator hidden beneath the shelf displayed a single line of text. Authorization black confirmed. No names. No details. No questions. Back in Meridian Station, Daniel opened a small wooden box stored beneath his bed. Inside rested a folded American flag, an old Marine Corps Challenge coin, and a simple wedding ring he still could not bring himself to wear or put away forever. Beneath those memories sat a second phone unlike any device sold on the civilian market. It had no manufacturer logo, no serial number, no visible charging port. Daniel turned it on. The screen displayed only one sentence. Stand by. Recovery teams mobilizing. Estimated contact, 58 minutes. Daniel exhaled slowly. It was the first deep breath he had taken since Emma disappeared. Outside his apartment window, life continued as if nothing had changed. Families walked home together. Restaurants filled with evening customers. Cargo pilots argued over delayed shipments. Somewhere among billions of people, the assassin believed he had successfully taken a little girl to force a frightened father into surrender. He had no idea that a message containing only 3 words had just awakened people who had spent years pretending to be ordinary citizens. And every one of them was already moving. 43 minutes after the message was sent, the first report reached the upper ranks of the Black Talon Syndicate. It sounded so insignificant that nobody interrupted their meeting. A warehouse on the outer edge of the Vega corridor had stopped responding. The operations manager shrugged. Equipment failure, he muttered. Send a maintenance crew tomorrow. 5 minutes later, another report arrived. A courier carrying encrypted payment records had vanished between 2 routine checkpoints. The navigation beacon still transmitted, but the pilot refused to answer every call. Someone joked that he had probably found a better employer. Laughter filled the conference room before the conversation moved on. 2 systems away, the assassin sat inside a private safe house watching Emma color on a blank sheet of paper that someone had found in a storage cabinet. She had barely spoken since leaving Meridian Station. She looked frightened, but she was not crying anymore. The assassin found that unexpected. You are quieter than most children, he said. Emma kept drawing without looking up. My dad says talking does not always fix problems. He leaned back in his chair. Your father is surprisingly calm. Emma nodded. That means you should probably be worried. The assassin smiled. Your father is one man. She finally looked at him. You do not know my dad. Before he could answer, his communicator chimed. One of his team leaders appeared on the screen, looking annoyed rather than concerned. We lost contact with Storage Hub 9. Technical issue? Probably. Then fix it. The screen went dark. The assassin dismissed it without another thought. Across the galaxy, the people who had answered Daniel's message continued moving quietly. The elderly mechanic boarded a civilian shuttle, using an ordinary travel ticket purchased under his real name. The scientist canceled 3 weeks of research with a single sentence that read, family emergency. The former cook walked into a shipping office, collected a sealed crate that had been waiting untouched for almost 9 years, and signed the receipt without asking what was inside. None of them contacted Daniel directly. None of them contacted one another. They did not need instructions. They already knew the protocol. Meanwhile, inside Black Talon headquarters, irritation slowly turned into confusion. 3 more safe houses stopped checking in. An accountant responsible for moving funds through anonymous shell companies reported that several financial networks had frozen without explanation. Their money had not been stolen. It simply could not move anymore. "This is impossible," one executive complained. "Nobody even knows these accounts exist." Another officer frowned at the growing list displayed across the conference table. "Run a security audit." "Already started." "Find the leak." "We cannot find one." A long silence settled over the room. Finally, the oldest member of the syndicate folded his hands together. He had survived 4 decades in organized crime because he trusted patterns more than luck. Who approved the operation on the human child? Every eye shifted toward the empty chair reserved for the assassin leading the mission. One younger executive answered confidently. "It is a simple leverage operation. The father is a civilian cargo engineer." The older man continued staring at the reports. "Then explain why 6 independent failures started less than 1 hour after the child disappeared." Nobody had an answer. Back inside the safe house, Emma carefully folded her drawing before placing it on the table. The assassin glanced at it out of curiosity. It showed a little girl holding hands with her father beneath a bright blue sky, while stars filled the background. At the bottom, she had written 3 simple words in careful block letters. "He always comes." The assassin looked at the drawing for several seconds before quietly looking away. For the first time that day, a feeling he could not quite explain settled into the pit of his stomach. Somewhere, somehow, the situation no longer felt like he was holding a hostage. It felt as though someone else had already started counting down. The emergency meeting inside Black Talon headquarters lasted less than 15 minutes before turning into something far more uncomfortable. Nobody was discussing the missing warehouses anymore. They were discussing Daniel Brooks. Every public record they had purchased described the same unremarkable man. 39 years old. Widower. Cargo systems engineer. 1 daughter. Clean financial history. No criminal record. Tax payments always on time. It looked almost painfully ordinary. "Run a deeper search," the oldest executive ordered. "We already did," a technician answered. "There is nothing deeper." "That is impossible." The technician swallowed before opening another window. "It gets stranger. There are almost no photographs of him before 12 years ago. Employment records exist, but several employers no longer exist. Medical records are complete, yet there are unexplained gaps of nearly 3 years. Military service? Officially, 6 years with the Marine Corps. Officially, the technician nodded uneasily. His retirement paperwork was signed at a classification level civilian systems cannot access. The room became noticeably quieter. "Show me." The screen filled with military documents before most of them suddenly dissolved into gray security notices. "Access restricted." "Federal authority override." "Record archived." "Request denied." One executive laughed nervously. "Some veterans end up doing classified work." Nobody else laughed. The oldest member leaned closer to the display. "Try searching by operational history instead of personnel records." The technician typed rapidly. Several unrelated missions appeared before disappearing almost immediately behind another layer of restricted access. One fragment remained visible for less than 2 seconds. Recovery Division. Black Winter Program. Status: retired by presidential order. Then it vanished. Did anyone copy that? Silence answered him. The technician slowly shook his head. The file erased itself after detection. One younger officer folded his arms. So what? He was Special Forces once. He retired. Now he fixes cargo loaders. The older executive looked directly at him. "Have you ever seen a presidential retirement order for a cargo engineer?" No one answered. Hundreds of light years away, Daniel sat alone in his apartment exactly where he had been for the past hour. His untouched coffee had gone cold. The secure phone remained on the table beside him. It vibrated once. New message. Recovery teams in position. Awaiting authorization. Daniel read the sentence twice before locking the screen again. He did not respond. Instead, he opened Emma's school backpack. Inside were homework papers, colored pencils, and a folded permission slip for next week's science museum field trip. He smiled sadly when he found a small note she had hidden between two notebooks. It read, "Do not forget pancakes Friday." Daniel carefully slipped the note into his wallet beside an old family photograph. Then he quietly whispered to the empty room, "I did not forget." Back inside the safe house, the assassin paced near the window while another communication request appeared on his terminal. "Report," the Syndicate executive demanded. "The girl is secure. Has the father contacted you?" "No." "Has he attempted a rescue?" "No." The executive frowned. "That does not make sense. He is probably accepting reality." The older voice on the other end became noticeably colder. "No. He is doing something. We simply do not know what." The connection ended. The assassin looked across the room at Emma, who was reading one of the old children's books someone had found to keep her occupied. She looked up for only a second before returning to the page. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. Why are you so certain your father is coming?" Emma smiled as though the answer was obvious. "Because people keep thinking my dad is just my dad." The assassin frowned. "What does that mean?" She shrugged. "When I was little, I asked him why he never talked about work before fixing ships. He said some jobs are finished only when nobody remembers they happened." She turned another page. "Then he told me the best heroes are usually the ones nobody notices." The assassin stared at the child in complete silence. Somewhere deep inside, a thought he had refused to consider finally surfaced. Maybe they had not taken the daughter of an ordinary man. Maybe they had interrupted someone who had spent years making the entire galaxy believe he was ordinary. Exactly 2 hours after Emma disappeared, every major communication terminal inside Black Talon headquarters flashed the same priority alert. There was no hacking animation, no threatening music, just a clean white screen with black letters. "Incoming diplomatic transmission." The executives exchanged confused looks. "Diplomatic?" one of them muttered. "Since when does anyone negotiate with us?" The oldest member pressed accept. A plain conference room appeared on the display. No military banners. No government seals. No rows of armed soldiers standing behind a podium. Only a single man wearing a dark gray suit sat at one end of a polished wooden table. His silver hair was neatly combed. A simple American flag rested in the corner of the room. He folded his hands and spoke with the calm voice of someone opening an ordinary business meeting. "Good afternoon." Nobody answered. The man continued anyway. "My name is William Harper. I represent the United Earth Executive Office." One syndicate leader leaned toward the microphone. "You are calling on behalf of Daniel Brooks?" Harper paused for a moment before answering. "No." The room grew even quieter. "I am calling on behalf of Earth." Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. That was impossible. They had not kidnapped a government official. They had not attacked a military installation. They had taken the daughter of one retired Marine living on a civilian station. Harper slid a thin folder across the table, even though nobody there could touch it. "We are aware that you currently have custody of a human child named Emma Brooks." The oldest executive forced a confident smile. "Then perhaps Mr. Brooks has finally realized cooperation is the correct choice." Harper looked directly into the camera. "You misunderstand why I am here." "Then explain it." "Very well." Harper's tone never changed. "Return the child." One executive laughed. "That is all." "Yes." "No ransom?" "No." "No prisoner exchange?" "No." "No negotiation?" Harper slowly shook his head. "There are no conditions." The silence that followed felt strangely heavy. Finally, the younger executive leaned forward. "What happens if we decline?" Harper did not answer immediately. He reached for a glass of water, took one slow sip, and placed it back on the table with deliberate care. "You still have an opportunity to end this peacefully." "That was not my question." "I know." Harper folded his hands once again. "The answer remains the same. Return the child." The oldest executive narrowed his eyes. "Is that a threat from Earth?" Harper's expression remained almost gentle. "No." "Then what is it?" "Advice." Before anyone could speak again, the transmission ended. The screen faded back to black. Nobody in the conference room moved for several seconds. Finally, someone muttered, "That was unusual." Another executive scoffed. "They are bluffing. Governments always bluff." The oldest member continued staring at the empty screen. "No. You actually believe that?" "I have spent 42 years dealing with governments." He slowly stood from his chair. "Governments threaten when they want something. That man never threatened us." Across the station, Daniel's secure phone vibrated once more. He unlocked it. A single sentence appeared. Diplomatic notice delivered. Awaiting final authorization. Daniel read the message without changing expression. He looked toward Emma's empty bedroom, where a nightlight still glowed beside her bed because she insisted complete darkness made the room feel lonely. After several long seconds, he quietly locked the phone again without replying. Somewhere inside the hidden safe house, the assassin looked out through the narrow window while Emma sat peacefully reading another chapter from her book. He suddenly realized something that made his heartbeat quicken. Earth had not asked where the child was. Earth had not requested proof that she was alive. They had simply instructed the Syndicate to return her, as though they already knew exactly where she was, and were offering one final chance to avoid whatever came next. The warning expired exactly 1 hour later. No dramatic countdown appeared across the galaxy. No declaration of war interrupted civilian broadcasts. Life continued as usual, which somehow made what followed even more unsettling. A Black Talon logistics officer arrived at one of the Syndicate's largest supply depots only to discover the loading bays completely empty. Every transport contract had been canceled overnight. Shipping companies claimed routine scheduling conflicts. Fuel suppliers suddenly reported inventory shortages. Insurance providers suspended coverage pending unexplained risk assessments. None of those decisions violated a single law. Together, they strangled an entire operation without firing a single shot. Similar reports poured into headquarters from every sector. Financial transfers remained frozen. Trusted brokers quietly resigned. Safe houses discovered their leases had been terminated by anonymous property owners. Private repair yards refused service without explanation. Longtime information dealers simply stopped answering messages. "What is happening?" one executive demanded. "People are disappearing," another answered. "No," the oldest member corrected quietly. "They are choosing sides." Hundreds of light years away, the elderly mechanic stepped off a passenger shuttle carrying nothing more threatening than a weathered toolbox. The former scientist entered a communications relay station using valid civilian credentials before calmly beginning a routine software inspection requested by local authorities. The retired cook checked into an inexpensive motel overlooking a commercial landing field and ordered coffee while watching cargo traffic through the window. None of them wore uniforms. None of them carried visible weapons. They looked like ordinary Americans traveling for ordinary reasons. Yet every one of them occupied exactly the place they needed to be. Daniel's secure phone vibrated again. Recovery teams established. Containment complete. Awaiting release authority. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment before typing his first reply since Emma had been taken. Confirm child status first. The response appeared almost immediately. Child confirmed safe. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Relief washed across his face for the first time all day. Only after opening his eyes again did he send a second message. Proceed. Inside the safe house, the assassin suddenly noticed that every communications channel had gone strangely quiet. His backup team missed 2 scheduled check-ins. Then a third. He contacted headquarters. The call failed. He tried another encrypted frequency. Nothing. Even the emergency relay produced only static. Emma looked up from the table where she had been finishing another drawing. Something is wrong, is not it? The assassin forced a confident smile that fooled neither of them. Temporary technical problems. She tilted her head. My dad says when everybody has technical problems at the same time, it is usually not technical. Before he could answer, the lights flickered once, then stabilized. A motion sensor near the entrance chimed softly. One visitor approaching. The assassin immediately checked the exterior cameras. The screen showed a delivery van parking outside the building. A middle-aged woman stepped out carrying 2 cardboard boxes marked electrical maintenance supplies. She smiled politely at the security camera and pressed the intercom. Good afternoon, she said. Building management sent us to inspect your power regulators after the grid fluctuations. The assassin frowned. He had never requested maintenance. He muted the speaker. Ignore them, he whispered. A second alert appeared. Another person approaching from the rear service entrance. This time it was an elderly man wearing the uniform of a municipal water inspector. Minutes later, a third notification arrived from the rooftop access hatch. Communications technician requesting antenna calibration. Emma quietly watched the growing list appear on the monitor. That seems like a lot of people, she observed. The assassin no longer smiled. His instincts, sharpened through years of surviving impossible situations, told him something every report and every missing communication had been trying to say since morning. None of the people outside looked dangerous. That was exactly why they frightened him. Somewhere beyond those walls, ordinary people had begun arriving from every direction with perfect timing, perfect paperwork, and perfect patience. For the first time in his career, the assassin realized he was not hiding from an army. He was surrounded by neighbors who had quietly decided it was time to bring a little girl home. The building remained quiet. No alarms, no explosions, just the soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of traffic drifting through the station outside. The assassin stood near the security monitor, watching the strangers remain exactly where they were. The woman with the electrical supply boxes leaned casually against her van, reading something on a tablet. The elderly water inspector sat on a bench eating a sandwich. The communications technician on the roof appeared to be adjusting equipment with complete patience. None of them made another move. Why are they waiting? The assassin whispered to himself. Emma closed the children's book in her lap. Because my dad does not like people getting hurt. He turned toward her. You think they are here because of your father? No. She smiled gently. They are here because he asked for help. Before another word could be spoken, the secure terminal finally came back to life. A single incoming call. Unknown source. The assassin accepted immediately. Daniel Brooks appeared on the screen. He looked exactly the same as he had that morning. Plain gray shirt. Calm expression. No anger. No panic. No trace of exhaustion despite the longest day of his life. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. Thank you. The assassin blinked in confusion. For what? For keeping her alive. That answer caught him completely off guard. He had prepared for threats, accusations, even hatred. Gratitude had never crossed his mind. Daniel continued in the same steady voice. Emma has asthma. She needs her inhaler if she becomes anxious. She has not needed it today. The assassin unconsciously glanced toward the small backpack sitting beside the couch, where the inhaler remained untouched. Daniel noticed the movement immediately. I appreciate that. You should hate me, the assassin said quietly. I am focused on bringing my daughter home. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Nothing else matters. The assassin looked at the security monitors again. Your people have surrounded this place. Daniel shook his head. No. Then who are they? Americans. The answer sounded almost too simple. Daniel continued before the assassin could interrupt. Some served beside me. Some never wore a uniform. Some build bridges. Some teach school. Some fix engines. Today they all received the same message. Child taken. The assassin felt his stomach tighten. Daniel nodded once. Nobody ordered them to fight. Nobody told them what to risk. They decided that on their own. The assassin lowered his voice. If I release her, do they leave? Daniel answered without hesitation. Yes. No revenge. No. No prison. Daniel paused for a moment before speaking. That decision belongs to the governments involved. It does not belong to Emma, and it does not belong to me. The assassin searched Daniel's face for any sign of deception. There was none. Only a father waiting patiently for his child. Emma quietly climbed down from the couch and walked over to the communication screen. Hi, Dad. Daniel's entire expression softened. Hi, Peanut. I knew you would come. I told you I would. She smiled. You did. The assassin slowly knelt beside her. For the first time since accepting the contract, he finally understood what everyone else inside the Syndicate had failed to see. Emma had never been the Syndicate's leverage against Daniel Brooks. She had become the line that separated mercy from consequences. He reached into his pocket, removed the electronic access card controlling the apartment door, and placed it gently on the table beside the little girl. Then he looked directly at Daniel. Tell them to stand down. Daniel held his gaze for several long seconds before quietly answering. Open the door first. Without another word, the assassin turned toward the entrance, took a slow breath, and reached for the lock. The lock clicked with a quiet metallic sound that somehow carried more weight than any alarm ever could. The apartment door slowly opened. Nobody rushed inside. Nobody shouted commands. The woman carrying the electrical supply boxes simply set them on the floor and stepped aside. The elderly water inspector folded his newspaper and stood. The communications technician climbed down from the roof and waited near the entrance with his hands in his jacket pockets. They looked less like a rescue team and more like neighbors arriving to help someone move furniture on a Saturday morning. Emma looked toward the open doorway, then back at the assassin. "Can I go now?" His shoulders dropped as though he had been carrying something much heavier than responsibility. He gave a small nod. "Yes." Emma smiled politely. "Thank you for giving me my books." The assassin lowered his eyes. "You are welcome." She walked through the doorway without fear. Waiting just beyond the threshold was Daniel. He knelt before she reached him, wrapping her in the kind of hug only a parent truly understands. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Emma finally leaned back just enough to look at him. "I told him you would come." Daniel smiled, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "And you were right. Can we still get pancakes?" Daniel laughed quietly, the first genuine laugh anyone had heard from him that day. "I think we have earned pancakes." The people standing nearby smiled without saying a word. One by one, they turned around and quietly left the building. The elderly mechanic picked up his toolbox. The scientist removed her maintenance badge and slipped it into her pocket. The former cook tossed his empty coffee cup into a recycling bin before walking toward the shuttle station. No speeches, no congratulations. They simply returned to the ordinary lives they had paused for a few hours because somewhere a little girl needed to come home. Later that evening, inside Black Talon headquarters, another emergency meeting was called. This time the reports sounded very different. Supply routes had resumed. Financial networks slowly unlocked. Anonymous contractors quietly returned to work. The invisible pressure that had surrounded the Syndicate all day had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. One younger executive finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Why did they stop? The oldest member looked around the room before answering. Because they achieved their objective. That was all they wanted? Yes. He slowly closed the personnel file marked Daniel Brooks. "We believed we had discovered the weakness of humanity." He shook his head. "Instead, we discovered its boundary." Months later, criminal organizations across the Orion Reach quietly updated their internal operating rules. The new policy occupied only one line buried among hundreds of operational procedures. Never involve a human child in any operation under any circumstances. There was no explanation attached to the order because none was necessary. Stories traveled farther than official reports ever could. Back on Meridian Station, life slowly returned to normal. Daniel repaired cargo loaders. Emma went back to school. Every Friday morning, they stopped at the same little bakery before work and classes. One rainy afternoon, Emma looked up while finishing another cinnamon roll. "Dad." "Yes, Peanut." "Were all those people really your friends?" Daniel thought about the mechanic, the scientist, the cook, and countless others who had quietly answered 3 simple words without asking for recognition. He smiled and gently squeezed her hand. Some were friends. Some were strangers. But the best thing about home is that sometimes strangers decide you belong to them too. Emma nodded as though that made perfect sense. She reached across the table and took another bite of her pancake while the station buzzed with ordinary life outside the window. The galaxy would remember that day as the moment an entire criminal syndicate chose mercy over pride. Daniel remembered it differently. To him, it was simply the day his little girl came home for breakfast. And sometimes the greatest strength in the universe is not how fiercely people fight for one another, but how quietly they show up when it matters most.